Good morning. This is Lori. Can you hear me?
I see Mr. Dang now. I don't know if his audio is on the.
Yes, we can, Representative.
Thank you.
Good morning, folks. Sorry that I'm late. For some reason, I didn't have the login information. Jim just sent it to me, so I'm now on. So what I'd like to do is to call the Planning and Stakeholders Relations Committee meeting to order. And the first thing is a roll call. So first, Jessica Walls-Lavelle. I think she has said that she's not going to be on the call, if I'm not mistaken. Ann O'Gorick.
Present.
Thank you, Ann. Stephanie Terman. You're on mute, Stephanie.
Present.
Thanks, Stephanie. Are there other board members on the call or in person?
Good morning, Mr. Tagg. Michelle Smianik here on Zoom.
Good morning.
Jeff Letwin on.
Good morning, Jeff.
Hey, John, it's Jerry DeWan. Good morning.
Good morning, Jerry. All right.
Lori Miskorsky.
Okay, thanks, Lori. Yeah, I heard you get on, so thank you. Now, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the November 10th meeting minutes. People had a chance to review those minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve as submitted?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now, the next item in the actually the only item on the agenda is after the minutes are the annual service report presentation by Ellie Newman. Ellie, are you on the call?
Good morning. Yes, I am.
Good morning, Ellie.
Morning.
All right. So good morning, everyone. My name's Ellie Newman. I'm the section manager of service development. And today I'm going to walk through our annual service report for the fiscal year 21. So this report is sort of our state of the union for the state of our transit system. It's our chance to look at all of our data and metrics for the past fiscal year and kind of see how we did on everything and measure ourselves up against our goals. So some of the different things that we look at are we look at ridership and cost per rider. We assess our on-time performance. We look at crowding to make sure that we're not overcrowding people on vehicles. We do a equity analysis with respect to Title VI concerns. And we also compare ourselves to peer agencies. And our fiscal year is from June until July of 2021. So the ridership story, as you could imagine, is one of significant decline. So we had a 56% drop from FY20, which FY20 was only 4 months of the pandemic. FY21 was entirely pandemic level ridership. So this was expected. We did see kind of proportionately different drops depending on the mode. So the bus was kind of the more resilient one with only a 55% drop, whereas light rail we saw over 70% drop, and then incline and access were about the same at around a 40% decrease from the previous fiscal year. On-time performance, we saw a little bit of an uptick here, so kind of less than a percentage point, but at least some progress in the right direction for both bus and rail. So this is measured that a vehicle needs to be within 1 minute early or 5 minutes late at all the time points along its route. And we didn't actually make any schedule adjustments during this period as we were sort of waiting to see how things played out with ridership and traffic patterns. So this really was entirely due to operational efforts in the field, as well as just decreased ridership usually does then lead to increased on-time performance. So now that we've kind of more in a settled state, we look forward to making more scheduled and intentional adjustments to our schedule in the next fiscal year. One of the big stories from FY21 was weekend service additions. So this was something that we've wanted to do for a long time, and we're able to go ahead and add weekend service and Sunday service on many of our local routes that didn't actually have any real service in the community. So if you look at this map, it's probably not very apparent, but basically the only service areas that currently don't have weekend service are the very, very pale blue ones. And so virtually our entire system now has at least some level of weekend coverage for our riders, which was one of our big goals. So in terms of numbers, this was able to increase the proportion of our service area population with access to weekend transit by about 7 to 8%, depending on the service day. So our service standards evaluation, this is something that we kind of set our service standards in the pre-pandemic world, which made them somewhat unmeetable depending on what the standard was. So we have passengers per hour standards where we have a goal for each of our routes, how many vehicles or how many passengers should be on the vehicle per service hour. Because we had capacity limits on our vehicles, we basically were not able to meet that. So we only had 4 routes that even met the standard. Normally it's much, much higher than that. So that's something that we may need to revise what that standard is in light of our new reality. For crowding, we normally would assess crowding based on kind of how many standees we have on vehicles. But since we had capacity limits on our vehicles, we only would allow between 10 and 25 people on the vehicles at a time for almost the entire FY21 period. So for this one, we just looked at how often did routes exceed that. And I've listed 6 of our routes that went over that capacity limit about 10% of the time. That was the 1, 51, 59, 61C, 83, and 12. So in order to help deal with that, we did try and put articulated buses on those routes wherever possible. Unfortunately, most of those routes weren't able to accommodate that vehicle size. So we did add frequency and trips to all of these routes. The 61C, we actually put trips on the 61D as sort of the sister route because that's a cheaper way to put additional trips that aren't quite as long as the 90-minute long 61C. For on-time performance, we had 21 routes that were more than 10% below our standard. As I said before, we didn't really do any schedule adjustments to improve on-time performance in FY21, but that is one of our focuses for this fiscal year. We are looking at some different techniques to kind of look at all the different time points along a route and kind of pinpoint where exactly buses are getting stuck or getting slow or running early so that we can really kind of adjust the schedule to meet what the reality is in the field. So our Title VI evaluation, this is one where we kind of categorize our routes based on whether they serve predominantly minority communities or predominantly low-income communities. And then we make sure that our service on those routes is at least as good as or better than any other route. So we met the standards or exceeded the standards on basically everything that we look at. The only exceptions were out of service and crowded trips. Out of service mostly is more due to what division the route runs out of. So we've had some staffing challenges at some of our divisions that happen to also run more low-income and minority routes. So there was some slight differences there that we'll be keeping an eye on. Then crowding did have some significant adverse differences. So this is really due to low-income and minority populations having a much greater propensity to use transit during this pandemic time. That's something that has been seen across the whole nation. So that's something that we monitored very closely. We tracked it. I was looking at it basically every day, and we were adding trips wherever we could within our workforce constraints as well. So for this year, normally we'd have a section on what our major service requests were from the public and how we evaluated those. And for this year, we did collect those requests and read through them and kind of catalog them, but we did not evaluate them. That's a very time-consuming process, and we sort of knew that this wasn't going to be a time that we could really add or extend routes, but what we wanted to focus on was more just our response to the pandemic, making sure that we could add service to those overcrowded routes wherever possible, dealing with just various things that were completely different with the pandemic. So for our ongoing focus, we had some service changes, some major changes that were put in November of 2020. So those were trip additions on routes experiencing crowding that I mentioned before, and then some of our commute routes had major reductions. Some of our routes went from 1,000 riders a day down to 100, and so we cut that service to kind of rebalance things. So that obviously had some impacts that we're monitoring. We also have a public comment period ongoing until February 2nd, and we have a public hearing coming up on, February 1st. A public hearing is on January 27th, so we welcome any public comment at that. We have a continuing focus for this year on rebalancing service to meet our changed ridership patterns. We're kind of seeing a proportionately more midday ridership than we used to, and a lot less peak ridership. So can we move those resources to where they're being used more? And also just figuring out some scheduling efficiencies where we can better use our resources, since it's obviously a very constrained time right now. And finally, we are planning to update our transit service standards. So this would be what I mentioned earlier, with kind of needing to maybe reset our goalposts to be something that's still challenging, but more achievable than our pre-pandemic service standards. And that's all I had. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Ellie. Any questions from the committee members?
No.
Okay. What about any questions from other members of the board? Okay. And then, are there any stakeholders that are in the room or on Teams that have a question of Ellie? Okay, seeing no questions, Ellie, great presentation. A question I have, is Sandy on the call?
Good morning, John. I'm here.
Yeah, we don't have to approve anything, right? Well, this was just a presentation. I wanted to make sure this wasn't something that we needed to approve and pass on to the board.
Right, I agree with that, John. This is not an action item. This is just a report.
I just wanted to clarify. Okay, well, look, thank you again, Ellie, and thank you, folks. Do I have a motion to adjourn the Planning Stakeholders Relations Committee meeting?
So moved.
Okay, so the meeting stands in adjournment until next month. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. All right, we'll just give everybody a minute to switch their agendas over for the Finance Committee. Okay, I'll call to order the Finance Committee for January 2022. We'll start with a roll call of our members. Board Member Liptak. Representative Davis.
I'm here.
Board Member DeLon.
Mr. DeLon, you're on mute.
Board Member DeLon, are you still with us? Okay. If there are any other board members present, could you please identify yourselves?
Jeff Letwin.
Michelle Smith. Sorry, Jeff.
Lori Mizgorski.
Stephanie Terman.
John Tagg.
Thank you. Okay. Our first agenda item is approval of the minutes of the November 10th, 2021 Finance Committee meeting. Did anyone have any questions or revisions to those minutes? Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And a second? I'll second. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. All right, we have 2 resolutions this month. The first one, authorization to apply for and enter into agreements for CY 2022 operating and capital grant funds. Pete.
Good morning, Madam Chair and other board members. So this first resolution is for authorization to apply for and enter into grant agreements for calendar year 2022 for both operating and capital funds. On an annual basis, we do come before the board and ask for blanket approval to submit various grant applications for both federal, state, and local level. Some of those examples on the federal level are our 5307 urban area funding, 5307 flex program funding, 5337 state of good repair, as well as our Pennsylvania Department of Transportation grants for both the operating and capital budget. We also submit grant applications to Allegheny County and the Regional Asset District. In addition, there are various discretionary grant programs that crop up during the calendar year that we sometimes have a tight deadline in terms of applications. So this resolution would allow the authority to submit the grants that become available in calendar year 2022. This resolution also requires that the authority and the finance division would regularly report to the board on grants that have been applied for and ultimately entered into. So I'm requesting authorization for approval of this.
Great. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from any other board members?
No.
Okay. Do I have a motion to send the resolution to the board for approval?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Let's see, our second resolution is authorization to extend and amend the agreement with Bank of America to provide merchant bank card services for automated fare collection systems. Go ahead, Pete.
Yes, thank you very much. The second resolution back in January of 2015, in accordance with the board adopted procurement policies, the authority issued a request for proposal to obtain services for merchant bank card services. These services include, but are not limited to, our debit and credit card processing, specifically related to the automated fare collection system. In June of 2015, the authority board authorized a 5-year agreement for a not to exceed amount of $2.5 million with Bank of America NA. And this agreement also included 5 additional option years at the authority's sole discretion. To date, the services provided by Bank of America have been satisfactory, and this resolution would exercise the first of those 5 option years and extend it to January 30th of 2023. It would also increase the not to exceed amount by $662,500 to a total amount of $3,162,500. Are there any questions on this particular resolution?
I just have a question. Is the $3.1 million for just this year?
No. It would be, yeah, that's a good question. It would be the 600,000 would be for this upcoming year. And that is a little bit fluid, obviously, depending on ridership levels, which ultimately impacts sales and credit card usage. Also, with the introduction of the mobile app, some of those credit card fees are covered through the agreement with Masabi. So it is a little bit fluid in terms of how much will ultimately be spent in this next, this first option year, I should say.
Okay, great. Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from other board members?
Just a question, John Tagg. Have there been any issues that you would report out on with Bank of America, or has everything gone pretty smoothly?
No, everything with Bank of America has been smooth. You know, going back 5 years, obviously when it was a new program, and so yeah, I always have growing pains when you introduce a new program like that. But no, once it was established, there haven't been any issues.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Pete.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, and Pete, our last agenda item is review of the November and December 2021 financial statements.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So we will be covering both November and December since there was not a December meeting. So for the month of November, total operating income was $3.4 million below budget, and on a year-to-date basis was $18.9 million below budget. And as in prior months, both the monthly and the annual variances continue to be lower due to passenger and access shared ride revenue, lower levels of that. Fortunately, our total expenses for the month of November were $7.1 million below budget. And from a year-to-date perspective, total expense was $26.7 million below budget. Every expense category through November was below budget. Our total subsidy for the month was $3.1 million above budget due to higher state operating assistance, which is a timing issue. Year-to-date through November, our total subsidy was $3.3 million above budget due to that aforementioned state operating assistance and also some additional preventive maintenance invoicing. Our year-over-year results for the month of November, our total operating income was $7.5 million above last fiscal year. Some of the highlights: our UPass revenue was $2.2 million higher than last fiscal year. Monthly pass sales, $2.1 million higher than last fiscal year. And also our stored value sales are $860,000 higher than last fiscal year. Total expense year over year were $304,278 below fiscal 2021. This variance was primarily due to a one-time, 1-month premium holiday from one of our medical insurance providers. Our total subsidy is $10.3 million below last fiscal year due to lower federal stimulus funding and lower preventive maintenance usage. As I had mentioned at a couple of the earlier meetings, we had been undergoing a CARES Act FTA audit, which has since been completed. So we resumed our federal stimulus funding in the month of December, and we've submitted approximately $17 million in ARPA invoicing instead of CARES funding in this fiscal year. For this, moving on to, well, are there any questions about the month of November?
No.
All right, hearing none, we'll move on to December. Total income for the month of December was $5.13 million, which was about $106,000 higher than the November totals. The December amount of total income was $3.5 million below budget. So at the midpoint of the fiscal year, our total operating income is $22.5 million below budget. And we will be using ARPA funding to make up for that shortfall in total income. Our total expenses for the month of December were $1 million below budget. Our employee benefits was over budget by $2 million due to a one-time medical health insurance premium holiday, and that was actually budgeted in November, so that's why it's just strictly a timing issue. Our provision for injuries and damages was over budget due to one-time payments in workers' compensation and litigated settlements. Our subsidy was $2.2 million above budget at the midpoint of the fiscal year, and that's due to higher preventive maintenance invoicing than the previous year. So year over year, total operating income, $9.2 million above last fiscal year. And like I said before, UPass sales continue to be higher than last fiscal year. Monthly pass sales and also ticket sales are significantly higher than last fiscal year. At the midpoint of the fiscal year, our expenses are $1.27 million lower than last fiscal year. And that is primarily due to reduced employee benefits and materials and supplies expense. Our subsidy is $11.2 million lower than last fiscal year, and that's because we're using less preventive maintenance dollars in this budget cycle, and also to date lower federal stimulus invoicing. And as I mentioned, with the completion of the FTA CARES audit, our federal stimulus has resumed, and you'll see some of that in the upcoming months. Our operating reserves, we began the month of December with $151.3 million in operating reserves. We had additional cash from passenger revenues and various grant subsidies of $36.2 million. We had cash disbursements of $45.5 million during the month. So we ended December with $142 million in cash reserves. Can I answer any questions regarding either the November or December financial statements?
I assume the increase in the UPass revenue is due to our new agreement with the universities. Is that part of what's reflected there?
Yeah, well, it's really twofold. It's that, yeah, we went from $1.25 per tap to $1.65. And also last school year, a lot of the universities were on either remote learning or, well, for the most part, remote learning. And so at least this year, you know, other than maybe some small fits and starts of remote learning, to my knowledge, most of the local universities have been in person. So you're seeing a little bit additional usage. So it's both twofold. Yes, it's the additional per tap fee and then the ridership.
Great. Any other questions from the Finance Committee?
No.
And any questions from any other board members? Okay, with that, that's our business for this month. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
Thanks very much.
So moved.
Thanks. We'll see everyone in February.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Smianek, and you can make sure that you get your paperwork ready. We will now continue with the Performance Oversight Committee meeting. And before we address any other items on our agenda, I'm going to do a roll call. And so Representative Lori Migorski, are you still with us this morning?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you? Representative Austin Davis, good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good to see you.
Hey, it's good to see anyone these days, so I'm happy with that. Are there any other board members that are present with us this morning that are going to participate?
Jeff Letwin.
John Tagg.
Stephanie Terman.
Ann O'Gorick.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. All right, we're going to move along with our agenda. The first item will be approval of our meeting minutes from the November 10th, 2021 Performance Oversight Committee. Do we have any corrections or changes to our minutes?
No.
Hearing none, could I have an approval, a motion to approve in a second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion is approved. Thank you very much. This morning we have 4 resolutions. Our first one is Mr. Tony Trono. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, board members. I have 7 items for your review and presentation to the full board for approval. All of our bids were publicly advertised and our e-business documents were distributed. The first is LRV brake control boards. 1 firm accepted our invitation. One bid was received for the purchase of LRV brake control systems boards used to maintain our LRV fleet. It's the recommendation that the contract be awarded to the low bidder, which was Kenora Brake Company, estimated amount of $406,550. There's been no recent purchase of these items. However, the staff has determined the price to be fair and reasonable. Per our procedure, we did our single bid survey, suggested that this is indeed a specialized item and that the other bidders would have to go through Kenora to purchase the product. Number 2, Cummins ISB engine replacement parts.
The system has detected that a few of you are still connected to the conference and
3 firms accepted the invitation. 3 bids were received for the ISB engine replacement parts to maintain our coach fleet for a 1-year period. The low bidder Crossline Supply did not bid all the items per requested or per specified in our bid contract. So our recommendation is to award to the low responsive bidder, which was Cummins Inc., for 7 items, an estimated amount of $510,875.20. This price represents a 1% increase over the previous contracted price for these items over a year ago. Normally, I'll try to give you an idea what the low bidder who we did not accept, what their bid was to give you a comparison. However, they only bid 1 item out of the whole set. Their bid was $26,000, so it's not a very good comparison, but just to give you that information. Number 3 is diesel engine oil. 7 firms accepted the invitation. 5 bids were received for engine oil for the use in the authority's diesel-powered coaches over a 1-year period. It's our recommendation that the contract be awarded to Allegheny Petroleum Products, estimated amount of $357,750. Now, this price represents a 43% increase over the previous contracted price for these items over a year ago. As you probably have read in the news, we're faced with inflation that we haven't seen in the likes of about 40 years. Crude oil prices have actually shot through the roof. We're looking at right now a 50% increase in crude prices. But to give you an idea where the new market is now, the new market price, the other bidders ranged from $429,000 to the highest bidder of $676,000. So our low bid price of $357,000 is a bargain price. Number 4, remanufactured fuel injectors, Cummins engines. 4 firms accepted our invitation. 4 bids were received for the purchase of these fuel injectors. Our recommendation to award to the lowest responsive bidder, which was Cummins Inc., estimated amount of $657,902.40. This price represents a 10% increase from the previous contracted price for these items over a year ago. The other prices in this particular grouping, again, second bidder to the highest bidder ranged from $681,000 to $1.5 million. Also, Cummins is the territorial distribution of this product, so more or less locked into purchasing from Cummins. Number 5, turnout frogs. 3 firms accepted the invitation, 3 bids were received for turnout frogs for the authority's LRV system. Our recommendation that the contract be awarded to Progressive Rail, estimated amount of $850,400. This price represents a 30% increase from the previous contracted price for these items 5 years ago. Again, inflation, our steel indexes show that cold rolled steel is up over 105% from March of 2020. Long lead times. The other bidders for this particular product in our bids tab was $1.6 million, the second bidder, and the third bidder was $1.5 million. We're recommending the award of $850,000. Number 6, pest control services. 3 firms accepted our invitation, 3 bids were received for these services for the authority's various vehicles and facilities over a 3-year period. So our recommendation that we award to the low responsive bidder, which was Expert of Canton, Inc., estimated amount $273,265. This price represents a 54% increase from the previous contract for these items over 2 years ago. Obviously, labor shortages play a part in this pricing of this particular item, but we also added 20 new locations to this contract, which was also a contributing factor in the price increase. To give you an idea where the other bidders were, second bidder was at $305,000. To the highest bidder went to $1.14 million. So we are submitting a recommendation of $273,000. Number 7, unleaded gasoline. 4 bids were received for unleaded gasoline for the various vehicles and equipment over a 2-year period. So our recommendation that the contract be awarded to Petroleum Traders Corporation, estimated amount of $1,243,700 over a 2-year period. This price represents a 16% decrease over the previous contract adder for this commodity over 2 years ago. Now you might ask, I just told you oil prices are going up, and I'm telling you this is a 16% decrease. We do not award our fuel prices on the current petroleum market that's out on the world trade. We award on a contract adder. The contract adder is the vendor's transportation, profit, and overhead cost. That contract adder is what we are talking about here on a 16% decrease. Now that contract adder is then added to the oil price that's out on the market to give us our total sum of $1.2 million. So that's where the decrease comes in. It's on the contract adder, not on the worldwide petroleum price. If you have any questions, that concludes my report.
I think I'm going to need to put a seatbelt on over here with all of these increases in here. Those were some pretty large increases numbers, and I thank you for your explanation on those. That was just a comment. I have no questions. Representative Ms. Gorski, Representative Davis, either of you have any questions for Mr. Trona on these items?
No, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Trona.
You're welcome.
Mr. Trona, I just have to ask you, what does what does the turnout frog do on the LRV?
I'll give you my best. I'll give you my.
Tony, I can answer. This is Mike Heitkamp, COO for Operations. If you ride on the rail and you see when you where the rail crosses over to the opposite side, anytime the rail car changes direction, it rides over a frog. And they're called a frog because if you took a frog and laid it out, legs forward, legs backward, that's kind of what it looks like. So that's where that name came from, the old railroad.
Okay, I always learn some new term in this committee meeting. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a feeling that would come up. That's why I'm glad I'm sitting here.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. And that definitely is a great question on that one. Okay, any other questions from any other board members for Mr. Trona?
I just had a quick question on the pest control. Were there any local companies that bid on that?
The other bidders were Expert Pest Management, High Quality Pest Management. I do not know their exact location within Western Pennsylvania. Terminex was the current contract holder, which we had to terminate their contract for default, so they were not eligible for this bid.
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? If not, can I have a motion and a second to move this forward to our board meeting for approval?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed, so the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Trona.
You're welcome.
Moving on to item B, authorization for settlement of public liability claim with Mr. Mike Setra. Good morning, Mr. Setra.
Good morning, Madam Committee Chairwoman and committee members. This resolution would authorize Port Authority to settle a public liability claim. An accident involving a Port Authority bus and a pedestrian occurred at approximately 12:10 p.m. on January 18, 2020, near the intersection of Fifth Avenue and DeSoto Streets in DeSoto Street in Oakland. After servicing a stop on Fifth Avenue, Port Authority's bus operator was making a right turn onto DeSoto Street when the bus struck a pedestrian, Barbara Como, who was crossing the street at that time. Unfortunately, Ms. Como died as a result of her injuries sustained in the accident. Ms. Como's mother, Nancy Como, as executrix of her estate, submitted a personal injury claim to Port Authority seeking monetary damages for Ms. Como's death. Following negotiations between Port Authority Legal Counsel and the estate's legal counsel, the parties have reached an amicable agreement to fully and finally settle the estate's claim with no admission of fault or liability by Port Authority and the total amount of $500,000. Subject to any member questions, I would respectfully request that the Performance Oversight Committee recommend this resolution authorizing settlement with the estate to the full board for approval.
Any questions from our board members? Representative Davis, Representative Muskorski? Any other members have any questions for Mr. Setra? Could I have a motion to move this forward and a second, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Setra. Moving on to item C on our agenda this morning, authorization to award construction contract for the Bridge Restoration Group project. Mr. Greg O'Hare. Good morning. How are you doing, Mr. O'Hare?
Good morning. And yourself?
So far, so good.
Thank you. So this resolution seeks authorization to award the construction contract SYS 2112 for the Bridge Restoration Group project. The scope of work for this project consists of the steel superstructure repairs, concrete repairs, bridge painting, bearing rehabilitation, paving improvements, drainage improvements, epoxy bridge deck surface treatment. The construction activities will utilize single track or single lane traffic control to perform the work and minimize impact to operations. The estimated contract duration is 390 calendar days from notice to proceed, so approximately 13 months. The low bidder for this project is Gulasek Construction LLC with a bid of $3,607,450.91. Next slide, please. For a visual, just to give the board an idea of where these bridges are in the system, on the left-hand side is an aerial view, which depicts the 4 bridges in this Bridge Restoration Group project. In the top left-hand corner of the aerial view is Meringue Road Bridge, which is on the West Busway, carrying the West Busway over Meringue Road. Just southwest of Meringue Road is the Parkway West outbound bridge, which is on the West Busway at the terminus of the West Busway, connecting the West Busway to the Parkway West. To the east is West Liberty Bridge ramp, which connects the South Busway to West Liberty Avenue. And to the south is Highland Road Bridge, which carries Highland Road over the LRT system, the red line. On the right-hand side of the graphic shows the bridge for Highland Road. We could see looking at down the track lines along the red line, which goes towards South Hills Village, which all of our LRVs traverse. You could see the Highland Road Bridge to get an idea of the work area. And then above that in the top right-hand side is a view of the bridge and the deterioration of the Highland Road Bridge, just as an example of some of the level of deterioration that this restoration group project will remediate. With that, if there's no questions, respectfully request the committee to move the resolution to the full board for consideration.
Great. Thank you, Mr. O'Hare. Any questions from our committee members for Mr. O'Hare?
Sure. I have a question as it relates to small women, DBE-owned businesses. Is there any participation of that on this particular project?
So this bridge or this project is a state-funded project, which falls under the diverse business category, which requires a good faith effort by the contractor. There is no stated DBE goal. However, we anticipate that we anticipate seeing a diverse business participation of approximately 30% based on the information provided by the contractor to date.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. The bridge leading over, I think is it Aiken over the busway? Is that part of this? Sure.
No, sir. That's not part of this particular contract.
Just a quick question then. Is there any further information on that then?
I can get you some information on that particular bridge.
Okay, well, I'd like updated on it if I could. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions before we move forward? If not, I'm going to make a motion to move this forward to the full committee. Could I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion approves. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. O'Hare. Moving on with item D, authorization to award ancillary services construction contracts with Mr. Eric Bilski. Good morning, Mr. Bilski. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? Excuse me.
Doing great. Thank you.
Today, I'd like to present to you a resolution to authorize the award of construction contracts SYS 2109 GHGBP E, H, and RR for ancillary construction services. It's a long contract title. I apologize. The work for this contract is related to ancillary construction work that we issue out on a work order basis based on a task that we need, whether it be emergency services, whether it be some smaller planned capital projects. We have these contracts available to utilize in those cases where we can dispatch the contractors out a little more quickly than what Greg presented to you in the previous resolution, where it's a stated scope of work. This is more as needs come up, the contractors will submit a proposal for the work and we'll evaluate that. Now, the contract terms for these contracts will be 3 years on a base term, and it'll provide 2 contract option years, which at the sole discretion of the authority would be presented to the board at a future time. So in the case for the bidding, to provide a competitive bid situation and analysis, we provided estimated labor and equipment rate, or equipment hours, I should say, and the contractors bid rates against those hours. Additionally, there were allowances for materials, subcontractors, and specialty services. So the letters, and I have it broken down on the table for each contract for the 6 contracts, and I'm going to read through each one. The general heavy highway contract would be awarded to Michael Fasciano Contracting in an amount of $13,655,750. These are not to exceed amounts, by the way, because it's based on our utilization of these contracts. We received 3 bids for that contract. General building, the award would go to Archon Contracting Incorporated in the amount of not to exceed $10,668,216. We received 6 bids for that contract. Plumbing would go to Tedesco Excavating and Paving Incorporated in the amount of $12,766,754, for which we had 4 bids. Electrical contract would be awarded to TSB Incorporated, doing business as Schulteis Electric, in the amount not to exceed $13,103,365, and we received 2 bids for that contract. The HVAC contract would be awarded to SSM Industries Incorporated in a not to exceed amount of $10,332,970, for which 2 bids were received. And lastly, railroad construction would be awarded to Railworks Track Services Incorporated in the amount of $14,110,094.50, and for which 1 bid was received. I will note that the railroad construction is the most specialized of all of these contracts and have the least amount of contractors in our area to bid this type of work. So that's why we're seeing only a single bid for that project, for that contract. All of these contracts total were under our independent cost estimate. And pending any further questions, I would respectfully request the committee move this to the full board for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Bilski. Do I have any questions for Mr. Bilski from our committee members?
Sure, same question, DBE participation.
Yes, this is again, this contract is based on state clauses, which would apply the diverse business. And in doing so, for each work order that is identified, we would then, they would identify and present to us a diverse business plan and their proposed goal for that work order. So as we move through the term of the agreement for each work order, the contractor would submit and it would be evaluated by our DBE office, and they would determine if the good faith efforts were met for each work order.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I have a question not related to this particular issue, though. If Mr. Cetra is around, it's related to the DBE issue.
I'm here, Representative Davis.
Hey, we had a meeting maybe about 2 or 3 months ago around this issue for some state language. I think your office was supposed to follow up with mine about changes to the state code in terms of DBE. Do you have an update on that, or did you get that back to my office yet? Or?
Yes, Representative Davis. We actually, over the holidays, we're communicating. Right now, it is your office, as I understand it, legal counsel in your office, based on input provided by me and our Port Authority team, are working on some language they are supposed to bring back to us for further input once they feel comfortable with their draft.
Okay, I'll follow up with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cetra. Thank you, Mr. Bilski. Any other questions? If not, could I have a motion and a second to move this forward to the full board?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 None opposed, motion carries moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Bilski.
Thank you.
I believe that is the conclusion of our agenda.
Hey, Michelle, it's John. I just wanted to clarify something. If Mr. O'Hare is still in the room, it wasn't Aiken, it's Highland. That was the bridge I was talking about. So if he's still in the room. Oh, there you go.
Yes, Greg is in the room and he heard you on that. Thank you. He'll look into that.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions?
Yeah, where's the dog, Michelle?
The dog is locked up in the other room with Michael having coffee. She was barking and demanding breakfast. So, and she's 190 pounds. So she's 90 pounds. I don't argue with her. So she's bye-bye having breakfast. Any other issues other than that? Can I have a motion to conclude our meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Great. Thank you
Aye.
all very much.
Okay, good morning. I'll give everyone a moment to switch over to the Technology Committee. In the absence of our chair, Jen Liptak, I will be calling the meeting to order. However, I am the only member here today, so I would be asking if my colleagues would be willing to step in. And if you could just let me know who is still here. Thank you.
Michelle Smianik, I'm here, and I will be glad to participate.
Thank you.
John Tagg.
Senator
Stephanie
Bruce is
Kerman.
on.
Ann O'Gorick.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Tim Brewster's on the line.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you. Okay. The first thing is the approval of the minutes from November 10th, 2021. Are there any changes or questions? Okay, hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Thank you. Hearing that, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, any nays? Okay, thank you. The minutes are approved. Okay, the first order of business, we have the authorization to enter into an agreement with Hitachi Rail STS USA Inc. for video wall programming services. And Jeffrey Devlin, would you take it away?
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. We're really excited to I'll say, finally bring this to the committee for review. This has been a multi-year progress just getting to this point in planning, et cetera. So over at our Rail Traffic Operations Center in the Operations Control Center, we have a video wall that the rail dispatchers use to monitor the rail traffic as it's going around, and you can see a view of it there. This equipment is at least 20 years old, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. It's definitely seen its age. I will leave it at that. So it's been a few years getting to this point in planning and prep, and it's going to be a couple more years to get it all done. So it's not quite as simple as just replacing the projectors and the screens. There's a lot of programming work that needs to happen. So this is a sole source agreement with Hitachi Software. As Hitachi runs their software runs the rest of the system, we need them to do some programming interface to tie in with the new equipment. So we're still working on the procurement for the actual equipment. Hopefully we'll be bringing that to the board in a month or two, but we want Hitachi to begin the programming effort that they need to do at this point. So we project this will take about 18 months for the programming effort by Hitachi. The resolution is for $665,000 for them to take care of this programming work. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, I request this be taken to the full board for approval. Thank you. You're muted. Representative Mazorsky, you're still muted.
Sorry.
There we go.
Okay, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment that I'm really surprised you were able to keep functioning with 20-year-old equipment and software. So kudos to you and the department to be able to do that. It's obviously a much needed upgrade. my fellow committee members for today. Do you have any questions?
No questions, Lori, but I think this is very exciting and you are correct. 20 years with this equipment. Woo. Yep, time to move on. Thank you.
Okay, hearing no questions, do I have a motion to send this to the full board for approval?
So moved. I would love to make that motion.
No.
Okay. And a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, the motion carries. It'll be sent to the full board for approval. And thank you, Mr. Devlin.
Yes,
All
thank
right.
you. As I was preparing my remarks for this, I was thinking about who has TVs in their house that are over 20 years old, and then I realized mine is. So be it.
Well, I think you should treat yourself to an upgrade.
We're not buying it though, Jeff.
Yeah.
Good point. Okay, thank you. Our next order of business is the account force estimating with Lee McClelland.
Yes, I'd like to do a brief intro if I may. So what we like to do is each month bring a different facet of technology that's being used around the agency so we can showcase how people are doing great and different things. So Lee McClelland has been with the agency for about 5 years now. He's an operations program manager in our operations in rail and bus. And what he wanted to present is how his group is using data to really do a much better job of calculating project costs for account force estimating. And with that, Lee McClelland.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Jeff said, my name is Lee McClelland. I'm a program manager, Boston Rail Operations. Mr. Devlin asked me here today to showcase an example of a tool that we've created to help track account force estimating. Just to give you folks a little background on what account force estimating is, prior to a project launch, department managers are required to complete AFE or account force estimating worksheets to estimate labor and material costs to support a project. Once these worksheets are complete and submitted, an AFE code is applied to that project. The results that we're going to review today are strictly for bus and rail operators during the calendar year of 2021. During a project, hours worked by each employee involved are entered into a time reporting tool, and those hours are then multiplied by that employee's wage. From there, it's assigned the appropriate AFE code and reported within our time reporting software. The issue that we've encountered over the years, there's been a lack of insight into expense tracking through the reporting tools. Reports can be obtained, however, they're manual in nature, and they tend to be limited to a short period of time, basically month over month. They can also be time consuming to generate. So what we've done, the solution that we provided was with the assistance of Microsoft Power BI, we have created a visual reporting tool to aid department managers in understanding personnel, hours, wages that are committed to each of the projects throughout their divisions. This solution can also be used as a forecasting tool for estimating hours and wages in future projects that are similar in scope. Next slide, please. This first graph here is an illustration of total hours committed to each AFE project code and separated by month. Highlighted within each column is a total of all hours for the supported projects. To the right, we can see a chart that lists the total costs and total hours by AFE project code throughout all of calendar year 2021. This graph can be drilled down by month and by division so that division managers have a greater insight into costs that impact their budget. It would also allow these the directors to have a better understanding of the personnel resources that they've committed to each project. And as you can see, collectively, we committed approximately 4,600 hours of operator labor to various projects across all 5 operating locations in 2021. Next slide, please. The second graph is an illustration of total wages. Once again, separated by month. The column is split into 2 categories. The lower portion of the column in the lighter color represents straight time wages, and the darker color represents any of the overtime wages associated with each project code for the month. To the right is another chart that lists the total wage costs associated with each division. And this helps, once again, give an overview to each department or division director as to how much labor cost they've committed to each project throughout the year. This report can also help division managers with justifying any budget variances that they may incur for committing resources outside of normal operations. So it can serve as an understanding of where the current costs are impacting their budget and how they can project future wage costs for these projects. And as you can see here, we've committed approximately $190,000 of straight and overtime wages across various projects throughout all 5 operating locations. Next slide, please. So in summary, this is an AFE tracking tool that serves as an aid to the directors to understand the various costs across all the operating locations. It can also assist the directors with understanding future costs that they may incur during future projects that tend to be similar in scope. And this brings me to the end of my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. McClelland. I don't have any questions. Do any of the other members have questions?
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present today.
And thank you.
Representative Mizgorski, this is Sandy Garfinkel. I understand that board member Liptak was able to join the meeting, so I just wanted to confirm that she's present also. Jennifer, are you with us?
Yeah, hi, Lori. I am. Hi, Lori. Thank you very much. I had a bit of a family thing. My daughter, we were at the DMV this morning getting her permit. She's 16. So thank you for covering on one of these important days. So
yes.
But thank you. And thank you very much for the presentation as well. But yeah, I appreciate you covering for me today. It's one of those things where you only get to do this once. So thank you.
Well, congratulations. You have a new driver. Are there any closing words you want to have? Or do you want to have the honor of closing the meeting?
Yep, you've done a great job. It's all yours.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. We are adjourned.
Yes.
He's on, right?
Senator Brewster, are you ready to start the Financial Audit Committee meeting?
Yes, I am.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Okay, fine. For those of you that are still on the call, I appreciate you staying. I want to call the roll at this particular time. Jessica Wallace-Lavelle. John Tagg.
Here.
Are there any other board members on the call? If there are, would you please identify yourself for the record?
Jeff Letwin.
Stephanie
Michelle
Terman.
Smee-
Lori Mizgorski.
Okay, thank you. Let's now proceed with the agenda. And you'll have to bear with me because I am on my phone and, as you can see, not on Zoom. And so if we can start with Mayor Duzel, Representative, will you identify who's representing Mayor Duzel?
Yeah, you know what? Hopefully we have, this is Peter Shank here from the Port Authority Controller. I hope I have Jeff Kent. Yes, Jeff Kent's on there, as well as Dustin Starr. And I don't know, was Dave Dussel able to make it or? Oh, there's Dave. There's Dave Dussel as well. So before I get started with Mayor Dussel, I just did want to acknowledge some unsung heroes that are involved in this audit on an annual basis, in addition to the folks from Mayor Dussel who do a fantastic job. Kelly Kendall, our manager of accounting, Ed Typansky, the director of grants and capital programs, Sarah Sharding, Tia Gunn, and Sean Tregeser, and then also Dana Barber from the HR department, who is instrumental in providing a lot of pension information that goes into the audit as well. So I wanted to publicly acknowledge those folks because they do yeoman's work working with Mayor Dussel on an annual basis and preparing the audit documents. So with that, I will turn it over to Dustin, Dave, and Jeff. And I believe that they have control over the slides. If not, Cheryl from our IT department is here in case it does not work. So take it away, gentlemen.
Thanks,
Thank
Pete.
you, Peter.
Yeah, I think Dustin indicated that he has control of the slide, so we should be good there. Thanks for having us. Happy to be here with you all. So we have a kind of a brief handout that we'll go through to kind of guide our presentation and recap the 2021 audit and results. So we'll stick to this handout as far as this discussion, but if you have any questions on any of the detailed information, please let us know. In terms of the composition of this handout, we're going to hit required communications, some summary financial statements, and then briefly touch on what's on the horizon. As part of the process, this slide lists the reports that we issue as part of our process. No real changes to what you've seen in the past. The main report that we'll cover, reports that we'll cover in this meeting are the first two bullets, the authority's financial statements themselves, along with the single audit, and then the communication of those charged with governance. The next couple of slides go through some of the highlights of that required communication letter. We issue that letter as part of any audit, every audit. And Dustin, if you want to go. Yeah, so the bulk of that letter talks about responsibility. So certainly our responsibility is to perform the audit in accordance with our professional standards and issue an opinion on the material accuracy of the financial statements. So in addition to the regular financial statement audit, the scope of your audit includes a single audit, which is a compliance side of things under the uniform guidance. That's based on the level of federal funding that you receive. So there's additional reporting that we do on internal control and on compliance with your significant federal programs. This page just talks about some additional information in the audit. The management's discussion and analysis is included at the front end of the financial statement packet, and it's a analysis that Pete puts together that goes through kind of some plain English summary of the financial statements, and so it's a good read in terms of getting a quick takeaway of the 2021 financial statements. And then I mentioned the single audit. We included in the financial statement packet is the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. That lists all of the federal funding that you've expended during the year. So that's kind of our starting point for the single audit that I mentioned. One of the notable changes this year from previous years, there was an adoption of a new accounting standard related to fiduciary activities. In the past, your pension audit, I mean, you still receive separate pension audits, separate audits of the 3 pension plans. And in the past, those separate statements were referenced, but they weren't pulled into the Port Authority's financial statements. GASB changed the accounting related to that to require that those pension financial statements to be included in the reporting entity of the authority. So although the information isn't new, it was always audited and presented separately. It's a notable change because it's now pulled into the Port Authority's financial statements as separate fiduciary statements. So it added, several statements and also several pages of footnote disclosures related to those pension plans. In terms of estimates, our required communication letter points out certainly you report significant liabilities for net pension and OPEB. Those liabilities are certainly based on actuarial calculations, the assumptions of which are presented in the footnotes to the financial statements, but certainly subject to estimate. Similarly, the claims and settlements liability as well is based on significant estimates. And then results. Happy to report we received good cooperation, no difficulties or disagreements. We certainly thank Pete and his team for all their help during the process. We received everything we asked for and everything we needed to complete our procedures and get to the point where we are now. The reports are in draft form, but we're in good shape to move forward in finalizing after this meeting. If you want to go, yeah. So, and then this page just kind of goes through the results. So we, in terms of the reports that we issue as part of the process, the independent auditor's report on the financial statements is an unmodified opinion. That's a clean opinion. We issue a report on internal control, and in that report, no reportable findings noted, so no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal control noted in that report. And then our opinion on the major federal programs is an unmodified or a clean opinion as well. So no material non-compliance noted based on our single audit testing. And your major federal programs, you had 2 this year, the Federal Transit Cluster, which covers most of the federal funding that you get from FTA, and that's normally always a major program. In addition to that, this year, the coronavirus relief funds that were passed through from the county were also part of our major program testing this year. And then the last bullet on this page, total federal awards expended for fiscal 21, about $143 million. And I think Dustin is going to take over from here to go over some of the summary financial statement information. If there's any questions at this point, let us know.
Thanks, Jeff. 2021 ended with a net position of approximately $188 million. You can see that is a positive increase of approximately $30 million. Just to touch on some of the key changes from 2021 would be significant changes in the deferred outflows and inflows. That includes fluctuations related directly to the OPEB and pension plan. OPEB being the other post-employment benefit plan, so that would be retiree benefits such as health insurance. There was significant changes to those estimates based off of changes in premium costs, and then in the pension plans, there was significant gains over investments. So both of those changes correlate directly to that significant decrease in non-current liabilities and then the related deferred outflows and inflows, with an overall positive increase of approximately $30 million in net position, the equity of the authority as of 2021. Statement of revenues, expenses, and changes. Total operating loss decreased by approximately $28 million. As mentioned, the pension and OPEB changes, there you can see it's actually a negative expense because those liabilities decreased rather than increased as it did in 2020 due to those positive changes for 2021. Non-operating grants of approximately $400,000, capital grants of approximately $102,000, with a change in net position again of approximately $30 million for 2021. Funding the operating loss, as mentioned in the previous slide, there are some non-cash items that relate to the other post-employment benefit plans as well as the pension plan. Also backing out depreciation. Once you reconcile the operating loss, take out those non-cash items, you're left with a operating loss that is to be funded by grants of approximately $403,000. The items below then are the pieces that make up the 403. Capital funds used for operating of $52 million, capital used for operating, that is CARES funding from the FTA of $74,000, PennDOT net of any unearned revenue of $240 million, local funding, which is part of the match that's required, of $24 million, and then $13 million that was received as CARES money, and as Jeff mentioned, was part of the federal programs that we audited, of $13 million that again is part of the required local match for 2021. And you'd see then that that balances the operating loss is funded then by operating grants. Unearned revenue, so this is related to, specifically this graph is the PennDOT operating revenue. So anything over that operating loss, so once that's balanced to zero, that is required to be reported as unearned revenue. So funds in excess of the amounts that were applied to meet that operating loss to zero then get held as unearned revenue. This graph is showing throughout the years how that balance has continued to grow from one year to the next. And as of 2021, the PennDOT operating unearned revenue is approximately $157 million. There are some other PTAF, county capital, and other that is also included within the total amount reported on the financial statements of $190 million. However, the bulk of that relates directly to that excess PennDOT operating revenue that is in excess of the operating loss. Net pension liability. So here are the three plans for the pension liability. $272 million for ATU, $6 million for IBEW, and $32 million for non-rep. All of these balances have decreased from the prior year due specifically to positive gains in investments that are held within trust for these pension liabilities. This graph shows that the liability would significantly decrease or increase depending on whether or not there was an increase in market return. So the actuary uses about 7% to estimate what that liability is going to be from one year to the next. If a 1% increase in the actual returns would be received, so if 8% was received rather than 7% estimated, that liability would go down. And the inverse, if investment results were less than what the estimate was, that liability would go up. And this is a required disclosure that is found within the financial statements to get some background on how significant the estimated discount rate can be, and how that corresponds to how the liability is calculated. Net pension plan net position as a percentage of total pension liability. Again, you can see that these have increased from 2020 to 2021 as the investments grew through positive investment gains, as well as contributions that were made during the year. The ATU, or I should say all three plans now are right around the 75 to 77% funded, an increase of a few percent from the prior year. OPEB liability, same deal here, three plans, $479 million for ATU, $13 million for IBEW, and $33 million for non-rep. The big difference between the OPEB and the pension plans is that the OPEB liability is funded on a pay-as-you-go basis. There's no trust that is set aside to pay the liability of these three plans, which is not uncommon. The majority of our municipal clients do not have OPEB trusts to fund this and do operate on a pay-as-you-go basis. Again, this is now depicting if there was an increase in medical costs. So if premiums would increase or decrease, that liability would also increase or decrease, and that would be depicted on how big that increase would be based off of that change. Up and coming changes. So the big one here would be leases, and that's really the only one that I feel like I need to mention. So applicable for the next fiscal year, a new lease standard will be adopted. This standard is requiring any operating leases that are considered to be material to the financial statements to be shown as a lease liability as well as a lease asset. So the big change here is that in the past, any capital related type leases were required to be already reported as a liability. This is now changing to have operating type leases follow that same treatment. I've already begun the discussion and kind of looking at the lease portfolio that's out there. Not a ton of leases that are material to the financial statements as a whole, but we'll continue to work with management to make sure that all the tools are provided to get that lease standard adopted for fiscal year 2022. Any questions?
It's John Tagg. Just a question about internal audits, because we do get an internal audit report. I was a little bit confused. In other words, how much review do we do of our internal audit process?
Is that a question for us or for?
No, for you guys. For you guys.
So as part of the process, as far as our audit goes, a lot of the internal audit, we would gain an understanding of what the internal audit group had done throughout the year in terms of any significant reviews or findings. One of the consistent areas that their information is useful as far as our audit goes is their involvement in the annual inventory process and evaluating those results. Pete, I don't know if you will have anything to add to that in terms of the the internal audit process outside of,
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention the annual inventory audit, which representatives of Mayor Dussel participate in. We have one upcoming, I think the third weekend in February. And in addition, Mike Cetra, I believe, has presented or will present our audit internal audit agenda, but that would be separate in scope from what Mayor Dussel typically would review.
Okay. Thanks, Pete. Mr. Tagg, if I could just add briefly to that as well. In addition, as part of finalization of the of Mayor Dussel's audit report, the independent audit report each year, I also conduct an interview with them since the audit function reports to me. If there would be anything else unusual or concern that we would identify in any of our internal audits that would be relevant to the financial report during that fiscal year, I would also report that to the auditors for further review and consideration.
Thank you, Mike and Pete. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, Peter, before we move on, so what I'm hearing for the record is that there are no major findings, no findings at all. And I did not hear that there were any recommendations by Mayor Duzel. Is that on process?
Yeah, that is accurate.
Okay, just for the record, so the audit could not be more clean at this point.
It's the way we like it.
That's the way, and we love it. So, okay, do you want to proceed, or are we near the end here? Or, since I
Yeah, I
can't
believe
see
we
the
just have
slide,
we just have a resolution, Chairman, that I need to present, and then for the committee's vote. So is there another? Hopefully, there's another slide.
Well, let me do this. Have any other members of the audit committee joined the meeting?
I asked my questions. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're going to ask if we're looking. Peter, I'm asking you to facilitate for me there, so we can ask for a motion to authorize the audit.
Yes, so there's a resolution and some slides, authorization to accept the fiscal 21 independent auditors report on an annual basis. The authority engages an independent auditor to complete the annual single audit and financial statements audit of the authority's finance in accordance with the generally accepted auditing standards. Mayor Duzel was engaged as the independent auditor to complete the audit of the authority's financial statements for fiscal 21 and render opinion as to the authority's internal controls over financial reporting and compliance with relevant laws, regulations, contracts, and grant agreements. Next slide, please. The representatives of Mayor Duzel, as you just heard, have presented the results for the 21 audits to the Financial Audit Committee and concluded that the authority's financial statements, fiscal 21 financial statements, were fairly presented and reflective of the authority's financial position as of both June 30th, 2021 and June 30th of 2020, respectively, and the authority has adequate controls in place to ensure the accurate financial reporting and compliance with relevant laws, regulations, contracts, and grant agreements. So this resolution will authorize the authority to accept the 21 audit report and further authorizes the chair of the authority board and chair of the committee to ultimately formally sign and accept the report on behalf of the authority, obviously when it would be approved at the board meeting next week.
Very good. So at this point in time, John, I ask you to make the motion.
Senator Brewster, I'd be glad to make the motion.
And to stay within the committee, if it's appropriate, I can make the second. Mike Setzer, are you there?
I am, Senator Brewster.
I think it's appropriate. We only have 2 members of the committee. That is a quorum. I think it's appropriate that Peg has made the motion. I believe I should make the second.
I concur that's appropriate. We do not have any specific quorum requirements for the committees, unlike the full board.
Okay, and I'll make the second and ask for a vote on the motion.
Aye.
All right. Any question on the motion? Motion carries. Okay, Peter, anything else on your end?
No. I just want to thank again the representatives of Mayor Duzel, Dave and Dustin and Jeff and Marcus, who worked on the audit, as well as Diane. So thanks to Mayor Duzel.
I will do that as well. Thank you, Peter, for your effort and Port Authority staff. Mayor Duzel always does a great job, and I want to thank my audit committee as well. And I think this concludes the meeting.
Thanks very much.
John, do you want to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Motion carries. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.
See you all next at the end of the month.